Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen. I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, played 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey, and we're going to talk about trade rumors and potential movement for some of these, so-called rental players. But before we go there, Tom and I have been poring over the new COVID regulations, and both of us unsure that we completely have it correct because it is such a complicated venture. But if we understand it correctly, after the All-Star break, once players re-enter the league, they will be tested again to come through. They're not going to test at the All-Star break unless they need to do so for travel to go back to Canada or if they show symptoms. But once they get back, then they're going to just test on a periodic basis, but only dependent upon whether or not there's reason to believe that there's COVID. So
I think the only addition there is there will be a single test upon re-entry to club facilities post All-Star. After that,
this is what I said.
There would be no longer be asymptomatic testing.
Yeah. So in other words, as long as there's no sign of COVID, they're going to not test. But the minute there is, then they're going to have to test and make sure everyone's okay. So which I think falls in the CDC guidelines. I was just mentioning to Tom, I've got a grandchild who is tested positive and can't go back, but his mother's a teacher, and she is tested negative, has no symptoms, so she can, in theory, she won't be because she has another child she has to stay home with, but could go back and teach because she's fully vaccinated. So fully vaccinated, no symptoms, negative test, she can go back. So that would be similar other than the negative test.
So here's going to be the thing, right? So if a player has the sniffles, but he wants to keep playing, he just hides it, which could potentially be COVID, right?
Look, it could be, but yeah, I mean, I guess you could, but they're gonna be watching for all that kind of stuff. I mean, we're at the point now where we pull players off the ice because we notice something not right from 190 feet away. Right. So I would pretty much sure if you're sneezing in the dressing room, somebody's going to notice. So
yeah, you never know. I mean, there has been times where if it's a good enough player, you want to keep him in your lineup, right? But I guess this is different. This is, I guess I go back to the old days where they're always hiding the injuries, but this is different. This isn't an injury. This is obviously COVID, but
yeah, and this affects other people. And like I said before, I'm aware of some players who have expressed concerns because they have issues in their own life with children who are, I can't say that word for some reason, immunocompromised.
Yes.
So it's it's a complicated thing, but I think. I said this all along. I think the league has tried to do the right thing, and they've erred on the side of caution. And now, I think they see, and I think the CDC is moving. If they haven't already moved in this direction, I think they are moving toward this direction. That, in fact, the headline on my alert system today was that they're making. The new Omicron is kind of winding down, which is what they predicted. They said it would be a needle, just like my finger. It was going to climb up the top here, and then it was going to immediately drop back down because that's what it did in South Africa, and it's going to behave similarly in the United States. So if that's the case, and it goes back down, so
all done.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know if it'll be all over, but until the next one pops up.
I know.
But at least, maybe we can get some semblance of normalcy. And I mean, the problem with it all, this really is a case of whose ox is gored. I've talked to people; they don't know a single person who has died, and my wife and I know 6.
I know.
You know, including one a week ago.
Man.
You know, we went to the funeral. So,
Yeah.
you know, it just depends, like, you know, where you're sitting. And, you know, now I'm older. So the people I know are older. So, and most of the people who are passing away are older. You know, the gentleman that I'm speaking to was in his 80s.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had a cousin who was in her 80s and she died. So,
Wow.
but I also knew a man in his 50s who died.
Wow.
So, you know, I give the league and the Players Association full marks for bringing this together, trying to do what's right. They have tried to do that. They're working together on this again. This was a joint statement from the Players Association, and I don't know. I know people sit back and you know, just say we should do that and or you shouldn't do that or whatever the issue is. But it's a lot harder when you're the person tasked with making those decisions, trying to do what's right, trying to protect the assets. I mean, you know, everybody. There's nothing wrong with trying to protect the owners, you know, profits, the players' salaries.
Well, especially now when we have to 50-50 split with this collective bargaining agreement, right? So they're officially partners now financially. So
yeah. And before we get going, talking about trade talk, I also wanted to bring up Jimmy Matheson, who I know very well.
Leon Draisaitl. I wanted to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. You know, it's funny. You know, you smiled about this, and I've talked to a lot of people who also think it was very funny. And I've talked to other people who are very upset by that.
Draisaitl or Jim?
Well, a little both.
Right.
It just depends on the ox. But I think, you know, I think about half the people had the same reaction that you did. You know what? They lost again. Yeah. You know, like everybody's frustrated.
Well, and Jim didn't just let it die either. Jim had paid.
Well, that's the point. I'm a huge fan of Jim Matheson. He's been honored by the Hall of Fame. He's very classy, very professional. And you know, he pushed it. It's sort of like the umpire in Major League Baseball who, you know, walks away and then the guy says something and he turns back and reinitiates. So
just so everybody's clear, Jim Matheson writes with the Edmonton Sun Journal. Yeah. And he's a Hall of Famer, a great guy. Everybody respects him a ton. He's been around a long time. He was doing it when I was playing. Right.
Well, he goes back to the Oilers in the WHA, so 1970s. So he's 72 years old. So
and he and Leon Draisaitl, the big star with the Edmonton Oilers, got into a little tiff there during a press conference, and it didn't go away. Yeah.
Well, it didn't. And what happened is he asked a legitimate question about, you know, what can you do about it? What's the biggest cause for this mess? You know, basically asking what you always do is, okay, you know, we say he asked and Draisaitl said everything is wrong. Right. And, you know, and he didn't phrase it as politely as I'm going to. But
he had a real attitude with it too. Yeah. Like
right. You know, can you narrow it down is what I would say, you know. And he didn't. He just said, you know, can you tell me what's wrong? And you know, and then Draisaitl said something to the effect of, "Well, you seem to have all the answers, so you probably already know," or something.
It sounds like there's a history there, right? Didn't you?
Yeah, they did. And then Jim Matheson, this took it up as they said in Anchorman. This escalated quickly.
Yes.
When Jim said, you know, why are you being so pissy?
Yes.
And then it just went downhill from there.
Yeah. And he said, you had all the answers. Yeah, that was excellent. I don't know. See, I think, okay, so if I'm Leon Draisaitl, I'm a young guy. You know, yes, I'm an NHL hockey player. Yes, I'm getting paid a lot of money. They're playing terrible. They had a good start to the season. Now they're not playing well. Everything's going wrong. They don't have a good goaltender. And I'm sure he's asked a ton of questions and he's tired of the whole thing. And again, I think there's some history. It sounded like there's some history there between Draisaitl and Jim Matheson, and he was tired of answering all the questions. And that's
well. What's interesting to me is that I had said really the day before on a different podcast. Believe it or not, I do other podcasts. I cheat on Tom. I had said that, you know, I didn't like them trotting out Connor McDavid all the time to have to deal with all this because, you know, this is not his best setting.
Yeah.
You know, Connor McDavid is an unbelievable hockey player and a pretty polite guy. You know, he's almost a little, not quite, but he's a little Sidney Crosby-esque. And you know, and it's been hard for him. He's not known what to say. And the way they do it in a lot of teams is they alternate it a little bit, so no one's got to do all the heavy lifting.
Right.
But I don't know that Draisaitl was the right choice.
They didn't check his mood. They didn't have a mood meter there. That's for
sure. Yeah, because like in Detroit, they've had some losing this season, and they've had some, especially on the road. And Dylan Larkin does a good job. He comes out and answers the question and everything. But he's tired of answering the questions too. So they bring out Mark Stahl, who is perfect.
Yes.
Like you could ask Mark Stahl anything.
Yeah.
And he'll answer it, give you a reasonable. He's not going to say anything. You could say, did you use a revolver or an axe to kill your wife? And he would give you an answer, hold
on. You're on a roll today. Which ox you've gored, and then the revolver knife.
Well,
you're good
I just think that, some guys are just really capable of it. It doesn't matter what you're asked. They can handle it. They see it as, and I also think there's another element to this too. When you're in the dressing room all the time as a writer, you develop rapport with players.
Yeah, that's true.
You kibitz with them. You talk about them. I remember years ago when I was covering baseball, and the Detroit Tigers did a lot of their home games, and I got to know players, and I was the same age as ball players back then. That tells you how long ago that was.
There you go.
And I know Rusty Kuntz was an outfielder for the Tigers, and we had children born at roughly the same time. So I'd walk in there and we'd start talking about, like, what's your kid doing? And we'd all gone through the same kind of thing. And, there were a lot of players, we were the same age, so you could talk to them about movies and all kinds of things. Right. You had a relationship. So when you asked them a tough question, it wasn't the end of the world. They knew you were a decent person. They knew you weren't trying to embarrass them, that you just had a job to do. And they would try to give you some kind of answer. And you do the best to maintain some sort of relationship. Right. But hard questions have to be asked now and then. The problem is now writers don't have those relationships. Right. Now, maybe Jim Matheson and Draisaitl have known each other for a long time, but it's still a little bit harder when you haven't seen them every day and you're on a Zoom call and you're asking these tough questions. So I just think it's changed everything. So
I agree. Oh yeah, there's no personal relationship there anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going in there. The old days with the Oilers, I always tell this story, is that you'd go in the dressing room with 10 minutes to go before practice end, and there'd be coffee pot brewing, and you'd get a coffee, and then you'd sit in the player's cubicle waiting for them. You'd wait. There'd be 5 of us kind of sitting on the the benches that would go around the room, and then the players would come in, and we'd all get up, and they'd get in the thing, and we'd reverse. So, in the NBA, at least with the Pistons, where I've been in, they have recliners that are by their desk, and the players just sit in the recliners. So it facilitates the idea that you're developing a relationship, and you don't have that level of tension that you have when you never see these people because they're not in your room. Right. Because when you're in the locker room, it's like you're in their house. So anyway, I don't think it's the end of the world one way or the other. Probably shouldn't have happened. It's not a good look for anybody.
So you were once the head of the Professional Hockey Writers Association.
Right.
If you were in that role today, would you have a conversation with Jim Matheson?
Not at all. No. Jim is a pro. He knows what he's doing. Would I have done it that way? Probably not. But and what did he really do? Like, it's like, I don't think it's bad to ask a player, why are you so, angry about this? I mean, that's a legitimate question, but
he was in a confrontation. He wasn't being like the fatherly figure, like, Leon, are you okay? Like asking if he's all right. It was like, you're in a pissy mood.
Right. Yeah. And legitimate question, but could have been phrased better and to not make it so confrontational, probably. Totally, for sure. But
speaking of confrontational, I was at an event last night, fantastic event. We were at the Rockefeller Center in downtown Manhattan. They had rented out the ice for some of these season ticket holders. And I was skating around with one of the season ticket holders, and maybe you saw this. I didn't. He was telling me that he saw where Sean Avery is wanting to make a comeback. Playing
I didn't see that. No.
Yeah. I don't know what team is going to give him a tryout, though. His reputation. Yeah. I don't know.
How old is Sean Avery?
Late 30s, the guy was saying. I didn't know that, but he said he was late 30s, like 38 or something. That he's during this pandemic, he's got himself in way better shape. He thinks he's in better shape than he ever was when he played, and he wants to come back and try to play. So,
isn't it amazing? And it's going to become less true now because today's players are in such great shape and they have personal trainers, and everything else. But in the old days, guys would retire and then really get themselves in shape.
Yeah.
I've talked to several players who say, I was in better shape after I quit than when I played.
Well, when we played, we thought beer was a food group back then. So that kind of says.
Yeah. Well, so I think there are players who retire who still think beer is a food group.
that is true.
But they do, the one thing that players do now that they didn't do before is nutrition is important to them.
Yeah.
They pay attention to what goes in their body, and I think they're just more careful. And
I don't even think we didn't know or didn't want to know about nutrition. We just ate whatever we ate.
But it's just society. Society pays more attention,
Yeah, well, I would argue the opposite there. I mean,
you're totally wrong.
The numbers show the obesity rate in our country has gone up.
But it would be worse if it wasn't for the attention being paid. There's so many people, like doctors send people to nutritionists and stuff. And, I read some story where the nutrition sort of industry has had the biggest growth than a lot of other industries.
The numbers that I see are the exact opposite. I mean, maybe I should be careful. That may be true. The people that are into nutrition are really more into nutrition now, but the people that aren't into nutrition are just those.
Well, I think both can be true. I think we're, I think we're arguing two different things.
Yeah,
I'm arguing that there's more people than ever who are paying attention to what goes into their bodies, and you're trying to tie it to the fact that there are more people, on a percentage basis, who are, chronically obese.
I agree. I think the people that are into nutrition are more into nutrition now. They know more.
Right. There's much more knowledge. So
definitely,
yeah. Like I'll give you just an example. The cardiologist that I work with now.
These I don't want to do that to these guys that play now. That wouldn't be fair.
All right, let's move on.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Now let's move on. Let's move on from this topic. Let's talk a little bit about the trade rumors. I wrote a story yesterday where I sort of pointed out, like, the Rangers can be the big dog in this trade market because they're sitting there with over $6 million. And, you start talking about teams that are contenders. Right. And you have, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Florida Panthers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, all those teams that I'm mentioning, they have zero cap space.
Right.
Like the St. Louis Blues have like $160,000, and they must feel rich. Same thing with the Colorado Avalanche. They have $200,000 or $300,000. Washington Capitals have no space. Like almost every contender is right up the top. And then you've got the New York Rangers sitting out there with $6 million plus. Now, I think they're going to come away with one of the big defensemen and one of the big forwards on a rental basis.
And who are the defensemen?
I would, to me, the guy that I would want, and I think is really the best bargain in terms of cap space, is Ben Sherratt. And I do think they want a left shot guy. At least that's my thinking.
And is Giordano on the market?
Yes, he is. So,
see, I hear you with the numbers. There's no question. And there's no question the Rangers are a contender. But I don't know if I want to break up the band there. Why do I want to add something there? I just think that you've got Fox, who was a Norris Trophy winner on defense. Trouba has been playing outstanding. You got those young players. They had that kid, Braden. That's awful. He came up and scored his first goal the other day. Keandre Miller is a good young player. The problem is you bring somebody up and he's going to take somebody's spot. And is he that much of an upgrade to now look down the road and say, okay, what a great, let's say the Rangers go on a run, go to the finals, win the Stanley Cup. all those players that participate in that, and now it's a great experience for them. And one of those guys now isn't going to have that opportunity, one of those good young players for him, because you brought in an older player. I just don't know. I don't know if I would do it, especially if I've got to give up some good assets to get that player.
Yeah, you will. You will have to give up some good assets. You're not alone in it. I mean, what does Brian Burke always says? Like, more mistakes are made on July 1st, free agent signing day, and then the trade acquisition. But it's really NHL tradition to add someone. In fact, what do GMs say when they make it? They say, I felt like I owed it to my team. I felt, they were working so hard and playing so hard. I felt like I owed it to them.
But I don't think the players feel that way, though. The players don't feel that way, though. I think the players feel like, listen, if we're contenders because of what we've done in this room, why do you think you need to add something else? I think it's more to keep a GM's job, to make it look like, okay, so if I don't go get somebody and we get beat out in the first round, everybody's going to say, well, why didn't you go get somebody?
So you have never, ever, all these trades that are made, you've never thought it was a good idea to?
No, not at all. No, I think, like, for instance, I thought when Colorado, way back when they got Ray Bourque, I thought that was a great move. Ultimately, did not work for them the first year.
Somebody had to lose his job for Ray to come in.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's a unique player. I mean, that's a player that now I think really makes a difference.
So unless it's a superstar player, you think you're better off to just keep that harmony?
Okay, what are your needs on the team? If it's a superstar player that fills a role where you need that player, to be honest with you, I think it's more the third and fourth line guys, the fifth and sixth defensemen that make a difference. Depth defensemen. I agree with that. And you hear people say that all the time. We need more depth on our defense. A guy that may not even play right away, that may play only if there's injury or somebody starts playing bad. I would keep, like, if I'm the Rangers, I would keep my defensive core together. Again, you've got a Norris Trophy winner from last year. Trouba's outstanding. Bring in a guy, which they already really did during the summer. They brought in Tenorti and other big defensemen they brought in. I'm not, then I look at defense. I look at forward, and they've got Lafreniere is really a bottom six forward right now, especially when Panarin went out of the lineup. He moved up in the lineup, but that's a young player you want for the future. That's a first overall draft pick.
But don't you think they're at a disadvantage, though, with playing those guys? I mean, because, like Capo, and he really, they don't have, the kind of numbers you would like to see on a contending team right now. So now they're going to have those. They're great players. But
Great point. So you see Gerard Gallant at a press conference, and they ask about Capo Kakko playing up in the line with Zibanejad and Kreider. He says, yes, he doesn't have the numbers, but he's playing fantastic defensively. So maybe it's a young player that hasn't found his way now to score goals, but is now learning the game at the other end of the ice and doing a great job.
I mean, they're saying that, they say that in Detroit too about Lucas Raymond when he was in his 14-game goalless streak. Yeah, he was playing great. Actually, though, he had a lot of assists too.
Yeah,
so. But it's funny because that's how I always see that.
Honestly, when I say this, okay, so let's go through some of the trades that have happened in the past. I know we don't have them all in front of us, but can you name one off the top of your head that really paid dividends for a team?
Yeah, when the Tampa Bay Lightning won the first Stanley Cup, I'm pretty sure that Blake Coleman and Goodrow played a pretty big role in that, and also.
And did they trade for them?
Yeah.
Where'd they get them?
Sharks for Goodrow, and Coleman was from the Devils.
Okay, I didn't realize that. And what did they have to give up to get those players?
A lot. Goodrow was like a first-round pick. He actually had he wasn't a rental either. He had a year left on his contract, so that's why he was there again. But they identified. I remember talking about this because, and you really kind of lauded them, and I did too, because they sort of identified what their weakness was, and they went out and addressed it. They got guys who were hard to play against.
Right, but they signed, what's his name, the big guy that played in St. Louis. They signed him.
They signed him in the offseason.
Right. And same thing with Bogosian, the defenseman. They signed him in the offseason, right?
Yes, they did.
Right. So I like those moves there. Like Bogosian, I thought was a key.
You thought they were better moves than getting Goodrow and Blake Coleman.
I don't know better. Right? That's probably not fair to say because those other guys did play well as well. I don't know.
I thought that would be a real good example, but I do agree with you that most of them don't work out because so many of them, they make the deals and you give up a lot. Like, look at Klingberg, who is the guy that I think everyone is interested in. Well, we talk about what they want for Chychrun, and people said right off when they wanted what I think it was Pierre LeBrun, or maybe it was Elliot Friedman, one of the two, said they wanted an Eichel package, and people said, "Oh, that's too much." And I said, "I don't think it's too much."
Yeah.
Like I think you're getting a guy who's making $4.6 million, which is a good price for a higher level defenseman.
This Chychrun you're talking about, Chychrun?
Chychrun, yeah.
Right.
That's a good price. You've got him for 3 more years. Right. And one of the issues that teams are having is as soon as their defensemen, get beyond that second contract, they're looking for that, that $64 million long-term deal. Right. It's become all about the bigger money. Right. So, you're getting the good price on him for this year and 3 more. Right. He played really well last year, got 18 goals. He has an offensive upside, playing for a terrible team this season, not having as good a year, but can be a top pairing guy. Like if he goes to Boston's the team that everyone says is very interested in him. Right. And you play him with McAvoy, and all of a sudden that's a pretty nice left-right pairing, and you kind of like that. Well, is it worth giving up a first-round pick, a prospect, and another draft pick, a second-round pick, and then maybe something else?
For him, yes, because
I think so. I agree. I agree with you on that. So now I'm using that as an example. Why I don't think that was such a price, because you know what they want for Klingberg, according to Pierre LeBrun, is they want a first-round pick, a top prospect, and another asset.
No way.
Well, you're getting him for 1 year, or not even that. You're getting
29. He's 29 or
29. But this is it. This is a rental. There's no guarantee you can sign him.
Definitely. Yeah. See, I don't like those top end players. Again, if you're a contending team and you're getting a top end player, and I guess I'm kind of going against what I said before because I said Ray Bourque was a good move. But I think that was a unique situation. Like those top end guys that are going to want, like the Klingberg, I'm not doing it. If I'm going to have to give up all that you mentioned before, that's what Dallas is looking for. I'm not doing that. Definitely with Chychrun, I definitely do that. He's a younger player, more term on his contract. And and again, if you're a contending team, unless you have a specific hole that you need filled, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
And part of it is like you mentioned before. So you say that they didn't work out, and you're right. Those sometimes in the trades in the past didn't work out. The team gets, bumped in the first round.
Right.
Maybe it's the luck of the draw because only one team wins the cup, right?
Right. Well, it's more often than not they don't work out because only one team can win the cup. But it's not necessarily, and sometimes teams need these players to help them down the stretch if they're trying to get in a certain position. Although in today's parity league, sometimes it really doesn't matter what. Like if you're in the Atlantic, you're going to have to beat Tampa Bay or Florida. Does it really matter when you beat them or have to try to beat them? Not really.
Right. What do you think Seattle would want to get for Giordano?
Same kind of package. I think it'll be a first-round pick and either another pick or a deal. Now, the thing about him is the reason why Klingberg is also a little more desirable is he has a $4.25 million contract. So if Dallas kept some of the money, kept half the money, now he's down to $2 million. So that's why he could fit in a lot of these different places. Like you might be able to make him work in Tampa or Florida or everything else.
Right. Which Giordano doesn't have much left on his contract either, right? I think
just this year, but it's 6.7.
Right. So now, that's an interesting player for me because of his leadership qualities. He was a captain in Calgary and apparently just an unbelievable leader too.
Yeah.
For me, like that's the one. If you didn't have to give up too much, like if I'm the Rangers, I'm going. Well, maybe I'll look at that because we really don't even have a captain now. Although Kreider's had leader kind of year, but there's really no clear cut captain. If you get Giordano coming in, that's a role that you need filled right now. It's hard to come in as a leader when you just all of a sudden and lead that team, right? You can't walk into the room and all of a sudden be anointed, unless you're Mark Messier and be anointed the captain. But that's a move I think is interesting because of the leadership part of it. But
so you'd want him over Sherratt, who's Sherratt's your kind of player. I mean, obviously. Yeah. So
again, if it's Sherratt, if you're looking at Sherratt as a 6th, 7th, 8th defenseman, then I'd say do that. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying they're looking at that way, but
Ooh.
I don't want to move. I don't want those players. You're not going to take Truba's spot. You're not going to take Fox's spot. You want Keandre Miller playing. Lindgren, is playing well.
So you'd want Giordano to come in and be the seventh defenseman
for his leadership qualities. Yeah, say, listen, here, come on.
He's not going to do that. He's going to want to. If he's going to do that, he'd want to go to like Florida, and because he's going to want to play.
Well, okay, you're still going to play. You're going to be a fifth or sixth defenseman. That doesn't mean
wait a minute. So you are going to replace somebody then?
Well, out of the bottom two. For him.
Okay. All right.
For him, I would say yes.
Okay.
I would not normally do that.
But you would want him, but not.
Because I don't want to change my defense at all. I want to add a depth defenseman. I really don't want to touch my top six. But if it's Giordano and his leadership qualities, I would touch my top six.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to disagree on that one. Like I recognize your points because I do think there is chemistry is important, but Sherratt is a kind of player that you normally love. He plays with an edge. He's very difficult to play against. That's what they're trying to do in New York. They've sort of established that they wanted to be harder to play against, and they are. They are. And Sherratt was just in the finals last year. And I think that
I'm not okay. Again, you're not going to take Trouba out. You're not taking Fox out. They're legitimate big time players based on that. The young players like Lindgren, I mean, he battles every night. You don't want I don't want him to be moved. Him and Fox are a great tandem. And then you got Keandre Miller with, I think his upside, his potential is huge. So I want him playing. I want him to experience the Stanley Cup. And like we said, there's only one team's going to win the Stanley Cup anyway. So it doesn't,
Yeah. No, it's going to be interesting to see. So would you guess the Rangers are not going to make a move?
I think they're going to make moves that are depth moves. Depth defenseman, bottom six forward that's a grinder, that kind of stuff. They had Sammy Blais, and I believe he's out for the playoffs as well. I know he's out for the year. I believe that includes playoffs with an injury. So that role that he was supposed to fill, really hasn't been changed. I mean, the young kids have been playing that. But I think if they make moves, it's not a big-time move. It's a depth move more than anything.
So you're thinking, on that fourth line right now, I'm just looking at their depth chart. So the Kevin Rooney, Greg McKegg, Ryan Reeves line, you could make a move there. So they're not going to get into Thomas Hertl sweepstakes in your mind. So
I don't think so. And you bring up a good point. That fourth line, I don't see them touching that fourth line either, because they're happy. It's more the third line that be looking at or like a depth guy that could be a third or fourth line player.
Yeah. Well, see, this is why I disagree with you. Like I don't. Patrick Nemeth and Braden Schneider. I think you could bring in Sherratt and fit really nicely in that defense.
Right. And I agree with you totally. I'm not saying he couldn't fit in, but I want those guys playing. I remember back my first year in the NHL, we went to the Stanley Cup semifinals. We beat LA in the first round. We beat St. Louis in the next round. Then we played the Islanders. That was huge for my career to experience that. And that was just going to the semifinals. It made a huge difference in my game.
I don't want to keep making a big deal on this one. Maybe I do want a big deal. But what you're saying is, if you brought in Sherratt and tried to take out Nemeth, that the players
Nemeth can go. I'm fine with Nemeth, but I want Schneider and I want those young guys playing. Like it
seems to me they got room to have, because I think they would try to trade Nemeth in order to get even more cap space. But
true, yeah, no, I agree with that. He can go. I think
they are going to get a defenseman, and I think he's going to play.
He's going to be the fifth or sixth guy in my mind. That's the way I'd want it. But again, in a game, that's not necessarily written in stone, right? I mean, they can look and say, okay, here's our top four guys, clearly, and then there's a fifth and sixth guys. But during any game or during any series, based on injuries, whatever it is always injuries. So we talk about where they're at now. That's
career. But I think if you're trading for Ben Sherratt, and again, he's only a $3.5 million player, so you can fit him nicely in your cap, but. You'd have to give up a lot for him. There's no doubt. Like you're the minimum of first round pick. So
See, and again, that my problem is though, does he make us that much? And again, it's just not whether he's. I should.
I'm just surprised because you always just exalt usually the guys like Sherrod, who, especially for playoffs, you love guys like him.
But to me, they've already got Lindgren, they've got Trouba, they've got if they need to.
Don't you want a whole 6 guys like that?
Well, they're not going to have 6 guys like that when you got Fox in your lineup, because Fox is not like that.
No, he's not like that. But he plays a different kind of role.
Wow. So, and K'Andre Miller, I mean, that's one thing. He could be a little bit more aggressive, but he's a young
player.
They're
not taking Miller out. They're going to take,
So, but I mean, but you've already got Tenorti and you got Nemeth there already, and you're not giving up. You're not giving up anything. You stay with those guys, and again, you go back to the fact. Listen, only one team wins the Stanley Cup. So,
I just don't see the Rangers seeing it like that. I think if they've got a chance to improve, I think they're going to do it, and I don't think it's because Chris Drury is worried about his job. I think
I agree with that. I agree.
I think he would do it because I think that this would be better for the team to have Sherrod. I just don't see any circumstances in which adding Sherrod to that lineup is not a good idea.
Well, to me, it's the experience.
I understand. I get, but Nemeth's not a young player, and he's playing, right?
No, you're right. You're right. No, I guess, I guess I'm just thinking, okay, if you have to give up a first-round pick to get Sherrod.
Yeah, I mean, that's a legitimate. No one likes to give those up, but that's the going, the going rate. So,
because I just don't see the Rangers saying, okay, we get Sherrod, we're going to win the Stanley Cup. Like, nobody's going to say that, right? And no team can say that, right? I mean,
no, that's why. But I do think, this team, and you've said many times, and I completely agree with you, Shesterkin is the kind of player that can be a real difference maker in the postseason. So what if he's the best goalie in the postseason? It's possible.
Totally. Absolutely. It's just thinking a depth guy. I'm thinking depth. I'm just not thinking, I don't want to give up a first-round pick for another defense.
Well, I mean, I think that's fair. There, you run into general managers that don't want to do that, but I think if there is a chance to improve your team and add a guy that's really sort of a playoff style, I think you kind of want to do that. But
they're not getting pushed around now. They're
well, no, but you can't get enough of those guys. Right. I mean, that's what I learned from you.
No, very true. You're totally right. But I'm not giving. I'll give up something for a depth defenseman, a guy that can play. That's all I want. I've got my top 4 guys. They're not perfect.
Miller. We play 6, Tom. We play 6 on the ice.
Totally, we do.
But and those third pairing guys play 14 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, right. And there's injuries, and I want a 6th or 7th or 8th defenseman that I don't have to give up a lot for. It doesn't eat up a lot of my cap space. I agree with you totally that cap space is there, but I don't know if the Rangers need to use it all. It's just because you got it there, you don't need to use it.
That's fair. I mean, I don't think necessarily you got to do it. Like the Nashville Predators have $10 million, but I'm not talking about the Predators.
But you know what? I would be talking about, because to me, they're the surprise team of the season so far. Not because they played so well now, but because they didn't play so well before. To me, and we slightly disagree on this one, I thought their lineup is way better than what they showed the last couple of seasons. Now they're finally playing the way they can. If I'm anybody that's going to make a change, if I'm David Poile, the general manager of the Nashville Predators, I'm making a change. They got a chance to do something this year.
Are they better than the Rangers?
No, not necessarily better. But I mean, we talk about Johansson and what is his name there, Duchesne, about how little they've done with the big salaries and big contracts they have. Now they're playing better. So to me, that's more of a team. I'm saying, okay, you're not maybe in that group of 6 or 7 contenders right there. The Floridas, the Florida Panthers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Rangers, Washington, those kind of teams, Toronto. But you're just a notch below that. Now, if you make a change, now you've got your team much better. See, I just don't think the Rangers need to make their team better.
The Nashville Predators, they're not going to feel the same way when new guys come in. They're going to want people. They're going to say, yeah, this guy that's playing over here, if he can, somebody we can be better, they're going to want that. Well, why is that different than the Rangers?
Because their lineup is set. They've either got the top 6 guys, which I think are fantastic, or they got these young kids like Lafreniere that need to play. I think the experience, if they really believe they can go on a run, and who knows, you get knocked out in the first round, but if they believe they go on a run, like I said, my first year in the league, when we went on a run there to the semifinals, was my career. It's just the experience that you go through getting it is
Yeah, no, I mean, I like your explanation of that, because what you're saying basically is that the Rangers are dependent upon younger players, where Nashville's a more veteran guy, and just let the chips fall where they may. If you lose your job and you're a veteran, so what?
I think okay. I'm going to look at Lafreniere, for example. First overall pick in the draft. He's the bottom 6 forward right now. Not because he's doing anything wrong, but because the top 6 for the Rangers are excellent. They're playing great. But during the playoffs, again, you're going to have injuries. You're going to have players that just aren't going well at certain times. So what if he gets an opportunity in a big game and scores a big goal, or makes a big play? Like the boost in his confidence, his career. We talk about Steve Eisenman or Marilyn Mewmore likely going and playing in Team Canada and learning from Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier. It's on-the-job training. To me, that's the same thing with the playoffs with these young players, to get that on-the-job training. I mean, the intensity level, that goes way up in the playoffs. The fight, the will to win. Those are the things that really the players learn from being in those situations. Yeah.
Okay, so you're thinking about long-term and short-term for the Rangers, but for the Predators, you say short-term is it, because they're a veteran team.
Yeah.
They've got a bunch of players where, you're not worrying about that. I mean, and really, when you think about it, they only have a couple of younger, Tolvanen and Tomasina are really the only younger player. Carrier is young, but he's one of their better players. So even if they brought in someone else, he's still
like you bring up Klingberg. Like, who would really? I mean, if you're going to go get Klingberg, he's a rental. So who would really need Klingberg? I mean,
well, I to be honest with you, my understanding is there are 8 or 9 teams interested. So
Well,
yeah, so. But everybody's trying to figure out how to do it, because he's one of the cheaper guys,
right?
So, and I think that's why Jim Nill is trying to get more out of him. I think he'd be traded by now if they weren't asking for the moon and the stars. So
Susan asked a good question as usual. What about Strome? If the Rangers don't think they'll sign him, do you get traded? I see. If you think you're a contender, which they are, and you could go on a roll, I don't want to lose him, right? And I know you don't now. If you let him go as a free agent at the end of the year, now you don't get an asset back for him. But to me, those times have kind of changed a little bit, because your asset that you're getting for him is the cap space, right? If he leaves and you don't get him back, yes, you don't get another player, but you've got cap space there.
That's always been said, but it's hard really to convince your fan base of that. So
yeah, I know.
That's the problem. And it's fine. It is interesting how it's so different in football. Like, I hear football fans, and when like in football, they lose top players. They kind of go on, and then you hear the fans say, "Oh, what are you going to do? It's a cap problem." You try that in hockey, fan base will be right on you. So.
The good thing with the Rangers is they've stockpiled so many good young players and draft picks and everything too, though, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you don't have players already coming up. So if you were to get that first-round draft pick, let's say for Strome, I'm not saying you would, but let's say you're going to get that, you say, well, okay, yeah, that's nice, but we've got a lot of good young players already, right? So
yeah, which is the argument for giving up also the argument for giving up first-round pick. So
yeah, good point. Yeah, that's an point. Yes, you're right there. Good. I like this little debate today. This is good.
Yeah, it is. I to be honest with you, I as much as I do, understand your point, right. I don't believe the Rangers see it like that.
Okay. So I'm saying then that the Rangers will do something, but it will be for depth, either depth defense and probably.
And I'm saying they're going to go after one of the bigger time guys. Okay. Like I think Sherratt or, Hurdle or all that. And I'm not so sure that, like if you brought in Hurdle, I don't think it means Lafreniere sits on the bench, Right. So, or,
but again, remember, Lafreniere to me isn't a fourth line player, especially with the fourth line they have here now, which is a really good fourth line for the Rangers. So I don't think it's as much to say, well, you just bump him down the fourth line. Well, then he's not the kind of player that the fourth line is right now for the Rangers.
Yeah,
right? The Rangers' fourth line is banger and crashing. I will. The one caveat, though, like I said, if I was to bring in a player that is not purely a depth guy, it would be Giordano because of his leadership abilities.
Yeah. Well, I get that. Yeah. Well, what time is it?
We've got 45 minutes almost here. Ooh.
Yeah, well, I guess so. Anyway, we appreciate everyone tuning in. It's been a very spirited debate. Tom and I disagree on what the Rangers should do. I would definitely go after Sherratt and even a forward if I thought it would make me better. And Tom thinks that the chemistry is important, which Tom always believes, and I actually do too. But I think in situations like this, I do think the players kind of understand that,
and it's the growth for the young players too, right? If they do go on a run, the young players get their growth. Yeah.
But we appreciate it. If you want to read me, I'm at DetroitHockeyNow.com and also HockeyBuzz.com.
And if you want to listen to the radio version of the show, you can go to radio.co at 365 Sports. Again, that's radio.co at 365 Sports. We'll see everybody next week.